We're in Dubrovnik, our last stop on our adventures in Croatia. Dubrovnik is a medieval city, tightly packed inside its fortress walls. Walking through the narrow streets can be disorienting, so I thought I'd provide some tips on finding your way around the old town. The old town is completely surrounded by a massive stone wall built between the 13th and the 17th centuries. The walls were intended to deter rivals, including the Venetians and the Ottomans. And they were successful. Between the walls and skillful diplomacy, the city never faced direct attack until 1806 during the Napoleonic Wars. The people of Dubrovnik are quick to remind tourists of the Siege of Dubrovnik in 1991-92 during the Croatian War of Independence. There are several signs like this one showing the buildings damaged or destroyed by the bombardment of the Yugoslav Army and Navy. Dubrovnik's wealth came from its maritime activities, so its harbor was vulnerable physically and economically. The harbor was designed and constructed in the late 15th century. A chain was stretched from St. John Fortress to St. Luke's Tower at night. The three enormous arches at the center of the harbor are an arsenal built in the 12th century and enlarged in the late 15th century. It was used for shipbuilding and repair. Today it's a cafe and theater. The city has 4 city gates. 2 provide access to the harbor and 2 allow access from land. Ploča Gate is protected by the Rebelin Fortress, which is connected by a wooden drawbridge and a stone bridge over a moat. This is the outer gate. The Rebelin Fortress was built in the 15th century. Today it's a nightclub and event venue. This is the inner gate with a statue of Saint Blaise, patron saint of Dubrovnik. Saint Blaise is holding a model of the city of Dubrovnik. Today the moat below the bridges is a pleasant garden. The east side of the city is also protected by a moat. Pile Gate was built in 1471. This winding stairway was one of several defensive features of Pile Gate. St. Blaise blesses this portal to the city also. Just outside Pile Gate is a place that will be familiar to Game of Thrones fans, where it is the King's Landing. It is protected by Fort Bakker on the south and by Fort St. Lawrence on the north. We were lucky to be able to stay inside the city walls at Pucik Palace, a 17th century palace turned 5-star boutique hotel. It sits on Grundelik Square, near some of the most important places in the city. That's the dome of Dubrovnik Cathedral in the background. Ivan Grundelich was the most prominent Baroque poet from the Republic of Dubrovnik. He lived from 1589 to 1638. The view from our balcony, which has survived the 1667 earthquake that destroyed most of the city. After that, balconies were banned. Our room had all the modern amenities. A wake-up call was required. The cathedral bells sounded precisely at 6 every morning. My recommendation, if you have the time and energy, is to walk the wall. It takes between 2 and 3 hours and can be strenuous in places. But it will give you a good overview of the old town. Also, start early. It can be crowded and hot during the tourist season. There are 2 places to start your walk, near the Pile Gate and near the Plaza Gate. We chose the Plaza Gate since there were fewer steps to get to the top of the wall. From the top of the wall, you get a whole different perspective than down in the canyons of the city. All the landmarks you hope to visit are laid out before you. And you can see that people do live inside the city walls. And for recreation, the city dwellers escape to Lukram Island. From the walls, there are panoramic views across the city. Fort St. Lawrence and the Northern Wall. View of the city from Fort Mencheta. Note the basketball court next to the centuries-old city wall. Fort St. Lawrence is now a tourist attraction, movie set, and theater. View south to Luckrem Island from Fort Mencheta. Fort Bocker and Fort St. Lawrence guarding the King's Landing. Fort Mencheta was built in 1463 at the height of the Ottoman threat. The 20-foot thick walls had a series of protected gun ports. Looking down into the cloister of the Franciscan monastery. Big Onofrio's fountain stands at the west end of Stradun, the main street of Dubrovnik. The Stradun connects the eastern and western city gates. This is the only section of the city that was not rebuilt after the great earthquake of 1667 that demolished most of the city. We're at the southwest side of the wall now, looking at Fort St. Lawrence and Fort Bocker from another angle. We've been watching these alpine swifts fly by at such an amazing speed that it makes it really hard to photograph them. They frequently nest in old buildings, but when they are not nesting, they can spend over 6 months flying without having to land. Recent studies speculate that not only do they eat and drink while flying, they're able to rest while flying too. Game of Thrones location from a different angle. Southern wall is between 5 and 16 feet thick. Looking back across the city to Mencheta Tower. A close look at the old and the new. The dome of Dubrovnik Cathedral and satellite dishes. Homes with small backyards between the house and the wall. It has taken us about 2.5 hours to walk the wall with many stops for photography. Now it's time to explore in the streets, which may seem daunting when looking at a map, but you really only have to know about 3 parallel streets running roughly southeast to northwest. The main street we saw from the wall is Stradun or Plaza. It connects the 2 city gates. To the north is Prijeko Street. This is where you go to find restaurants. To the south is Od Pucha, a shopping street filled with shops selling handmade souvenirs, leather goods, and jewelry. Now let's take a walk down each of these streets, starting with Stradun. Our walk starts at Pile Gate. We saw the big Onofrio fountain from the wall. It was built in 1438 as part of a water supply system bringing water from a spring 7.5 miles away. It was heavily damaged in the 1667 earthquake, and only one of the statues on top remains. The 16 masks spout drinkable water, good to know on a hot summer day. Across the street from the fountain is St. Saviour Church, completed in 1528. Following the earthquake of 1520, which killed 20 people and damaged numerous buildings, the city fathers commissioned this church as a sign of gratitude for sparing the city from even more destruction. You see these lanterns on all the streets. Many have the name of a business on them, since signage is strictly limited on the historic buildings. Next is the facade of the Franciscan Friary and Church. The church was destroyed in the 1667 earthquake, but the facade from 1498 remains. The other end of the street is the city clock tower. It was originally built in 1444 and was damaged in the 1667 earthquake. By the early 19th century, it started to lean and was demolished in 1929 and entirely rebuilt to the original design in 1929. Lining the Stradun are Renaissance residential buildings, which replaced residences destroyed in the 1667 earthquake and subsequent fire. A law was passed after the destruction that required a common building layout. The ground floor was a shop with a door and a window in a single frame under a semicircular arch. The next two floors were the living areas, and the kitchen was in a loft above that to prevent a spread of fire. The street ends on Luza Square. On the left is Sponza Palace, a must-see. The Church of St. Blaise is on the right. More about that later. Now we'll take a walk down Odd Pucha Street. Starting at Gundelish Square and our hotel, we'll walk west. The narrow street is lined with shops offering handmade souvenirs. From the lanterns, you can see what is for sale and the ATM to pay for it. Like every street in Dubrovnik, there are churches. This is the Church of St. Joseph. It was built by the Carpenters Fraternity for their patron saint. And this is the relatively new Serbian Orthodox Church built in 1877. The street ends at the convent of St. Clare, behind Big Onofrio Fountain. It's easy to miss this walled-up doorway and window. This was the orphanage run by the nuns of St. Clare. Parents would leave their baby at the window and turn a wheel that swung the baby inside and rang a bell for the nuns. It must be lunchtime. Let's explore Prieto Street. The street is a mashup of old Gothic, Renaissance, and Baroque houses. Today, they've mostly been turned into restaurants. The seafood is very good here, especially the octopus. And of course, a few churches. This is St. Nicholas Church, originally built in the pre-Romanesque style of the early Middle Ages. The late Renaissance facade was added in 1607. Prieto Street ends at the city wall near the Placi Gate. Finally, there are four can't-be-missed sites in the city, closely grouped together. The first is Sponza Palace. It's located on Luza Square. Over the imposing door, it says Dugana, or Customs, indicating one of the many uses of the building since it was built between 1516 and 1522. It's a rectangular building with an atrium. The dedication plaque is dated 1520. Two angels holding Jesus' monogram. The palace has been a customs house, bonded warehouse, mint, armory, treasury, bank, and school. The building now houses the Dubrovnik State Archive, holding documents dating back to the 12th century. Across the square from Sponza Palace is the Church of St. Blaise, the patron saint of Dubrovnik. In 1349, the Black Death arrived in Dubrovnik, and the Great Council decided to build a Romanesque church dedicated to St. Blaise, the protector of the city. The church was completed in 1352. That church survived the earthquake of 1667, but burned in 1706. The current church was built in 1715. The main altar of the church in all its Baroque grandeur. The altar of St. Sylvan. In 1847, the skeleton of St. Sylvan was given to the city of Dubrovnik by Pope Pius IX. There are several St. Sylvans, and it's not clear which one this is, but he's probably St. Sylvanus, Bishop of Emus, who was martyred in 311. If you only have time to see one of these four must-see sites, it should be the Rector's Palace and Museum. The rector's palace was the seat of the government of the Republic of Dubrovnik from the 14th century to 1808. The building was built in Gothic style, but repairs and renovations over the years have added Renaissance and Baroque elements. The history department of the Museum of Dubrovnik has operated the palace as a museum since 1872. The banister on the atrium stairs has some interesting fittings. The museum's collection is wide-ranging, from 60 antique clocks to a massive coin collection. This was Dubrovnik before the suburbs. These two bronze statues were used to strike the hours in the city bell tower between 1478 and 1928. They're affectionately known as the Green Ones, or Maro and Baro. The ubiquitous Saint Blaise, carrying the city on his arm. State coat of arms of the Dubrovnik Republic from the end of the 17th century. Dubrovnik was fabulously wealthy in the 15th and 16th century and stored their wealth in these massive strongboxes with complicated locking mechanisms. The museum has a collection of 181 weapons used in the defense of the city over the years. Dubrovnik's wealthy elite moved around the city in these 18th century sedan chairs. The extremely wealthy families also expressed their wealth with elaborate and expensive furniture. This is the room where the ruling council met to govern the Republic of Dubrovnik. Last but not least stop on our 4 top sites is Dubrovnik Cathedral. The current cathedral was completed in 1713 on the site of several former cathedrals. The facade consists of 4 Corinthian columns supporting a large Baroque window with a rectangular gable and a balustrade with statues of saints. The dome of Dubrovnik Cathedral is the most recognizable landmark you see in the panoramic photos of the old town. The main altar holds a polyptych by Titian dating to 1552. The altar of St. James of Nepomuc with a beautiful Italian marble. The altar of St. Bernard is a Baroque masterpiece. Decorations around the organ loft are very Baroque. I hope this video helps you make your trip to Dubrovnik as memorable as we found it to be. It really is a unique place in this world we live in.